Well, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Hey, you guys are in my kitchen. Sorry there's not enough coffee for everybody. I'll make some later. But I have a special guest today, Mr. Bill Tefft. Welcome, Bill. Bill is a local Albuquerquean and a typewriter aficionado. And Bill had to exercise his muscles today to bring over two, not just one, but two Olympia SG1s and from his collection. 1956, 1961, so they span about a 5-year period. This is probably the last year, 61, the last
Very
year.
late, yep, late.
And this is more closer to the early part of the era of the
That's
SG1s.
right.
Why don't you give us a little overview, Bill, of the SG1s?
Well, Olympia is a German manufacturer. This was their larger model of the three that they were building back in the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
The SG stands for Schreibmaschine Grosse, large, the big one. SM, the famous SM Portable, that's the medium size, and then they even made a small one. This machine is a full-size, full carriage machine. We'll take the paper out, and it has the famous paper injector. So watch this. You can't do this with an ordinary typewriter.
No.
And you're ready to go. So you don't waste a single solitary second.
Right.
Inserting the paper.
That's one of the great features about the SG series that everybody likes, is the paper injector.
These typewriters were meant to be put on a desk and left there. I picked this one up locally and got it for a decent price. It had a few problems with it. There were a couple of broken pieces, and I managed to get a couple of other SG1 junkers from the same era and cobble together this one. This one was born in Germany, but it quickly moved to Muncie, Indiana, and that's where it was sold, probably back in 1956. This one I picked up just a couple of weeks ago at a local thrift store. A friend of mine calls me on the phone and he says, I think I saw some kind of German typewriter over at this local thrift store. I said, do you remember the brand? He said, I think it started with an O. And I said, oh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I ran over. Feet never touched the ground.
No, yeah.
Saw this on the shelf and I thought, oh, wow. Another, just what I need.
Yeah.
Another SG1.
Yes.
These things are 25, 30 pounds, okay?
Yeah.
They're not even luggable typewriters.
No.
You put this thing down, Joe and Andy, whether they like it or not, they own these, and they're going to have their dinner around this and everything like that. So they're
I wish we owned these. Yeah.
All right, anyway, I bought this locally, and I also got it at a really, really sweet price. This is exactly the way it was on the shelf, folks. It was absolutely pristine. It has a couple of stickers on it. This one,
Dynamic Business
Systems in Albuquerque. On the reverse, we'll take a look at that later.
Yeah.
It has the, I think that was the Born On sticker.
Yes, the Typewriter Service Company in Albuquerque.
In Albuquerque on 3rd Street.
And it has the old phone number of Chapel 36203.
That's right.
That alphanumeric prefix.
And I don't think they had those alphanumeric prefixes, at least I don't remember them into the mid-60s.
No.
64, 65, I think we were using all numbers.
Yeah.
So this machine, folks, is 60 years old.
Wow.
This year.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're celebrating this typewriter's 60th birthday.
That's right.
And when they reopen the movie theaters, we're going to take it in, and we're all going to get a senior discount when we bring this typewriter in to watch a movie.
That's right. All right. And we'll be typecasting the movie. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
Great idea. A German manufacturer, heavy, German steel, German iron, German craftsmanship, overbuilt, as we later found out when they went to the SG3 in the mid-60s. They went to a plastic shell, and but pretty much the same works, but a plastic shell, a lot lighter and a lot easier to move around or to chuck in the trash.
But still pretty heavy.
Still pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So these machines were used heavily, typically. But these two machines, this one in particular, I don't think this machine was used at all, and I think I know why. Because this typewriter, folks, has an 11-pitch cursive typeface.
Cursive, yes.
Yeah. I'll give you folks a few minutes to recompose yourselves.
Yes.
I couldn't believe it when I saw it in the store.
Yeah.
I did a type sample, I did a quick bound fox on it, everything worked, and I looked at it and I go, oh man, I hit the jackpot.
Yep.
This thing was a steal, folks, and it's absolutely pristine.
Yeah.
And the cursive is kind of an unusual cursive, and we'll look at that in
Let's talk
in a
about
minute.
typefaces for a moment, because we did some measuring. We took out our precision measuring instruments. There's always some question when you're an American and you're talking about European, especially Olympia, what is the actual size of the typeface? Well, it turns out from the manual or the information that Ted Monk has online, this is a 2.6 millimeter per character.
That's right.
And we actually measured it. We measured 10 characters on the scale with a caliper, and it's 26 millimeters.
That's right. And so the closest, I guess we would call SAE equivalent,
is
is
like
11 pitch.
Yeah, 11 pitch, right? And this
10 pitch.
10 pitch, yeah.
10 pitch.
This one is actually 10 characters is like a 32nd of an inch greater than an inch. Just a tad bigger than an inch, right? On this one. This one is 2.3 millimeters per character, and it measures that. If you measure 10 characters with a pair of calipers, it's 23 millimeters.
And it's dead on 11.
Dead on. Interesting typewriters, and they look identical.
They do.
But, as you point out to me earlier, if you look closer at these two machines, we come to find out something. They're not the same.
No, they're not. And it was those crafty folks at Olympia, back in the old country, they were constantly making improvements under the hood.
And that's one of the things that maybe was an indicator of the quality that they had, is the philosophy of constant improvement. But it also meant things were constantly changing from year to year. Well, let's look a little closer at some of the changes that we see between these two machines that were built roughly 5 years apart.
5 years apart, yeah. So this was made in the latter run, the later years of its model, pretty much the last year that they made these. The typewriter was born in Germany, but it was adopted by somebody very quickly. It was sold originally in Albuquerque, and we have a badge here, and then we also have a badge on the reverse. So it was kept in very, very good condition. A full QWERTY keyboard, number of features on the keyboard that are pretty interesting, a caret symbol, which is kind of unusual, a degree symbol, and then this funny little character here is for typing titles and things like that. So the way it is now is a single space, just a typical single space machine. If you were to push this down, then it double spaces. So it moves over 2 characters instead of 1. Under the hood, standard feed, ribbon reverse. You can force it into ribbon reverse, or it has an automatic ribbon reverse. When it reaches the end of the spool, it just runs it right back. If you have a bicolor ribbon, you have a red, you have medium, that is, it'll type in between. In an effort to be thrifty, a lot of people would put in a black ribbon. This would type on the bottom part of the ribbon, this would type on the middle part of the ribbon, and this would type on the top part of the ribbon. The white selection is stencil, so the ribbon doesn't rise. Okay. Over here is a tension selector. It works pretty well. So this adjusts the force that it takes to type. Underneath each key has its own little shock absorber. It's a little metal fastener, and so that when you type, there's a little bit of shock absorbing there. We have clear plastic type gauges set up with the type width. This one is an 11 pitch or a 2.3 millimeter machine. So it goes from 0 to 122 or so on. So you'll notice that the center of the carriage is at 61. I mean, margin sets, paper rest is adjustable, tab clear. You flip this down, run the carriage back and forth, and that'll clear all the tabs at once. Okay. One of the unique features of this machine is what they call the paper injector. That's this little lever right here. You just loosely put in a piece of paper, making sure that the rollers are engaged, and voila, you're ready to go. Newspapers use these a lot. all around the world. This was a typewriter that was built really to last, and this one has lasted. This particular typewriter has a very unusual large height cursive typeface, and it's in pristine condition. I really was lucky to find this. And this just goes to show, folks, you never know what's going to pop up. I thought that Joe and I had swept this city clean, that there wasn't a single solitary old typewriter out there that we really hadn't seen or hadn't crossed our grubby little workstations. But this one popped up as a total surprise, and this one had spent its entire life in Albuquerque. The body style from 1956 to 1961 is really identical. This one has a black knob, this one has a green knob. This is the shift, this is the shift lock. This one is the shift, but the shift lock button says SL on it. Another difference is that on the early models, they had this little cover over the paper bell rollers, and this one doesn't. Probably to save cost, or might have had a problem with debris going up into that area. This is the injector controls. You would set how long the page was. You'd set it on here. When you injected the paper, it would bring the paper up just to exactly the right place you wanted to do it. So this one brings it right up to the top. I can set this to come up to virtually any level. So if I was typing, say, a title, or I wanted the line to start further down, I could adjust this. Over here we have the paper rest, and this is also adjustable. And you could set it for the length of the page so that you knew exactly when you were going to get to the last line. This is 13-inch paper.
Yes.
This is 11-inch paper.
Oh, nice.
And you would set this here against these red arrows.
Oh,
okay.
Yes, yes.
And then as this paper, as the top of the page came up against this, you knew that was going to be your last line. That's when you were going to run out of paper. Olympia designed the machine so that you could very easily lift them off. So we're going to flip these levers on either side of the machine, and then we can flip the paper guides forward, and they're supposed to stay there, and then the carriage lifts right off. The band is exposed, and the escapement down here is also exposed, making this machine fairly easy to work on. As long as the pitch, and this one's a 10, matched the pitch of the keys, then you could just drop another one in and it would work just like flip, 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 and we're ready to go. If we look at the carriages, now we start to see some pretty dramatic differences between the 1956 and the 1961. First of all, we'll talk about the rollers under the platen. Now the platens are exactly the same between the 61 and the 56. But if you notice, this holder for the rollers, this has 4 rollers. But if we move to the 1961 model, you'll notice that it has 2 rollers. It has this much larger, more sturdy piece of metal here. This looks like cast. 2 rollers and an aluminum paper pan. A lot easier to remove and repair, where if we go back to the 1956 model, this pulls back so you have access to it. My guess is that this change was made to make it easier to service. So you didn't have to pull this out of the way. Right. So if we keep looking at the 1956 model, you'll notice as we move further down, we start to notice other changes. We have this bracket right here. We have the escapement release, where if we go back to the 1956 model, the escapement is completely different. There are actually three serial numbers. There's a serial number on the carriage, which almost always starts with an 8. There's a serial number on the frame, which almost always starts with a 7. And then there's another serial number buried inside the works. Again, they made This carriage, they made it in 11, 15, all the way out to a 36-inch wide carriage. Super wide carriage. Those were mainly used for newspaper typesetting, magazines, and a lot of other specialty uses. I don't think I've ever seen a 36-inch wide carriage in the wild. I'm sure they're out there and there are collectors that have them. So there are some differences that they made to the carriages. Because of these changes, these carriages are not interchangeable. Even though they look the same, you cannot use this carriage on the older machine and vice versa. That's something to be considering when you're collecting these. The serial numbers rarely match, folks. That's not a problem. But there are situations where if you were to take this carriage and put it on the older machine, it'll act like the machine doesn't work. And you'll think, But again, this machine is a 2.3 millimeter per character, and it's set up to be 2.3 millimeter per character on the carriage as well as the type bars. So this carriage is for this machine. So between 1956 and 1961, there were quite a number of little changes that were made. The SG1s are precision machines. They do not require lubrication, except perhaps on the carriage rack, a little bit of grease. They do not need to be lubricated. If these machines are cleaned and you have the right carriage on them, they'll work perfectly. You'll notice that the segment is fairly flat. A lot of these changes were probably made either because it was a different pitch, or they did as a cost-saving measure, or they did it because of advanced engineering techniques. But you'll see this is flat. When I got this newer machine, it was soaking in oil. These keys would not work. I degreased this machine, and so now they fall back. They're all supposed to do that without lubrication. If we move over to the 1956, you'll see that it's slightly curved here, and the slots in the segment go all the way up to the top, whereas on the newer machine they ended right about here and there was a little bit of a pan. My guess is that pan was put in to keep whiteout and other debris out of the segment. This pan above the segment looks a lot like it was there to at least collect some debris and to keep it out of the segment. It is a nice touch, I think, because a lot of times you're out there with erasing or a little whiteout, and you don't want it falling into the segment. Most of the problems with your segments and the type bars falling back smoothly are because there's debris. There's also too much lubricant that has solidified. These machines are going to be 60 years old plus. Works like the day it was made. This was I believe a Type 35. It's kind of unusual. You can see that it has descenders go down below the line, okay, and it also has descenders for the numbers. Now, most script do have descenders, but this one, the caps are so tall, so tall. My guess is this machine was probably used for wedding invitations or some other kind of fancy stationery purposes. I can't see anyone except me typing normal letters with this type of typeface. But I thought this was, when I saw this in the thrift store, I thought, wow, I really hit the jackpot, because this is something I don't think I've ever seen before.
What do you think about the overlap of here? Interesting, huh?
Clearly, I had this set at single space, and obviously it was not really meant for single space. So I'm going to do a little typing with it. I think I'll just set it on 2, folks. And we'll see what that looks like. The G, the E, the J, the C all go way down below the letters. And one of the things about this machine and this particular typeface is that a bicolor ribbon really doesn't work very well, because the vibrator doesn't really want to go high enough for you to type a full red character. So you can see now, it's really, the lowercase letters are mostly red, but you're going to still see a little bit of red. Now, this machine may need to be adjusted. Just give a little demonstration of the double space. So for titles or what have you,
I like the touch on this machine a lot. You know, I had for a while an SG3, and it was a wider carriage SG3, and I didn't really like it that much because it was so heavy. The carriage was heavy because it was extra wide. I mean, they're heavy machines to begin with, right? The way the keys feel, you can certainly just type and type with low fatigue. And I really think that the machine kind of disappears into the background, and it just becomes the tool that enables you to do the creativity. And that's really what you want out of a typewriter. Well, Bill, it was a lot of fun typing on this typewriter and having you show me both of these from the earlier to the later stages of the SG1 evolution. And these are certainly wonderful machines. If you had to have one typewriter, or in this case two, maybe having one or two SG1s might be an option, right? If you didn't want to have a closet full of typewriters, but you just wanted the best typewriter, like if you couldn't have a garage full of cars and only wanted one car, maybe you'd have a Mercedes or something, right? And maybe that's an analogy to this.
well, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly like one of the early Mercedes. It really has a nice clunk to it, nice weight to it. Of course, the SMs are also justifiably great machines. And I have to say that this machine isn't as wild style as most people might like. It has a couple of chrome accents to it, but really it's a straight utilitarian machine built in the classic German 50s style. So here's a question. Do you think it's almost too much typewriter for the common typist? Like, if you look at an SM3 or something, right, built in the similar era, built just as well but smaller, maybe that would be enough for somebody. But on the other hand, you can imagine the market this was designed for is the professional office, where the typewriter would just run and run and run for years and never drift out of alignment very easily because the grade of metals and the materials and everything was so well built. So it maybe not for the average just hobbyist typist, but if you were a serious writer that wanted to write on paper, at least for your first draft, maybe something like this, you know, hundreds of thousands of letters and words, right? Well, I'd say it's equivalent to a well-tuned Royal KMM, which you got recently. I'd say that this machine, I've seen old movies where this machine is in a lot of sets, newspapers. I've seen a lot of photographs of newspaper studios. One of the testaments is in the movie All the President's Men, where they're in the newsroom of the Washington Post. The room is filled with Olympia SG3s.
Interesting.
You'll notice that they'll have the paper injector. They'll have so if you watch those scenes carefully, I think I've read somewhere that the set designer and the director, the movie was made in the mid-70s, and so by then these machines were long since replaced by the IBM Selectric and so on. The director and the set designer wanted to make the newsroom absolutely period.
Wow.
So they had to go out and they had to find dozens of these old Olympia SG1s and SG3s to make the scene just absolutely authentic.
That's amazing.
They scoured the countryside for those machines.
Wow.
Another thing about these is that they're somewhat harder to find.
Right.
Particularly in as nice a condition as this one. This one clearly being a cursive probably was used maybe a
Right.
handful of times.
Right.
A handful of
Compared
times.
to a more conventional font that you'd use in a professional setting.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, if all of you out there in YouTube land start getting letters from me,
Yeah.
this is what you're going to get.
This is a letter writing workhorse.
It's a letter writing workhorse, but you're going to get it in a weird cursive
That's right.
type style. Right.
Well, Bill, this was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you coming by with these two beauties. And
Of course, I want to give a shout out to the Facebook SG1, Olympia SG1 group. We welcome all members, whether you have one of these fine typewriters or not. You learn a lot about the machines as I have, and there's a lot of very interesting photographs and repair tips and so on.
Very cool.
The Facebook group is highly recommended.
if you have to specialize in one particular brand or model of typewriter, this is certainly a beauty to get into.
Isn't it a beauty?
Yeah, it really is.
But it's meant to be put down and used there.
Yeah. This may be one of the few times where both of these gets moved, and that was going to my house and back. Right?
It's true. Once these get set down, you want to make sure that's where they're going to live.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And you guys out there, what about you? Do you think you want an SG1 or an SG3? I think they're very tempting. Well, this is Joe Van Cleve, and as always, stay well and stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.